Ever get that feeling like what you see on the surface, all the glitz and glam, there's got to be more to the story, like a whole hidden world behind the scenes?
Well, today we're going deep, behind the velvet ropes, right into the heart of the early 2000s hip-hop scene,
Yeah.
and our guide, a pretty intense Daily Beast excerpt. It's called, "I Was Gifted to Diddy. What I Saw Still Haunts Me."
Oh, wow.
Right, the title alone. Anyway, it's this deep dive into Elisabeth Ovesen's experiences.
Okay, and remind me.
You might know her better as Karen Steffens, author of Confessions of a Video Vixen.
Right, right, okay.
So the whole gifted thing,
Yeah.
it's immediately kind of unsettling, right? Like
Yeah.
being treated like a commodity, especially with someone like Diddy.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the power dynamics at play, especially back then. Exactly. And Ovesen, she doesn't hold back. She talks about the parties at Diddy's mansion, the insane lifestyle, but then there's this whole other side to it, a much darker side that she reveals. Now, before we get too far into it, I gotta put this out there. This deep dive, we're looking at it from Ovesen's perspective, as she tells it in this article, just laying out her experiences, not taking sides or anything on the specific allegations against Diddy or anyone else.
Make sense?
And Ovesen herself, she even says, others might have experienced that time and place differently. She sees herself as a survivor, which it's complicated, right? Lots of layers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, what makes Ovesen's account so fascinating is thinking about the early 2000s hip-hop scene in general, right?
Ooh.
Music was huge. Music videos were like events.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And this whole aura of luxury and excess was everywhere.
But behind that facade,
Exactly. There are these really intense power imbalances, especially when it came to women.
yeah.
And sadly, Ovesen's story isn't unique. It's like a bigger pattern of exploitation in the industry.
Yeah.
Women feeling pressured to conform, often at the hands of these powerful men.
It's like that saying, if these walls could talk. But in this case, someone is actually speaking up. And you can't ignore how this connects to so many other conversations happening, not just in entertainment, but everywhere, right?
You're right. It's definitely a much bigger issue. And, Ovesen's book, Confessions of a Video Vixen, the one that came out back in 2005, that was big. It was like a raw, unfiltered look behind the scenes.
Totally.
It gave a voice to what a lot of people suspected was going on, but nobody was really talking about openly.
And people definitely talked. It forced everyone to confront how the industry, especially hip-hop, was treating women, even if real change didn't exactly happen overnight. It also ignited this huge discussion about consent and agency, didn't it? Ovesen doesn't shy away from her choices, but reading her account, you really get a sense of the pressure cooker environment she was navigating.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really complex. It's not about condoning or condemning anyone's actions. It's about recognizing that even when someone seemingly makes choices freely, there are often unseen forces at play, especially within these imbalanced power structures.
It's like she was caught in a web of expectations and opportunities, all tied to the whims of a powerful figure. And it wasn't just about navigating fame, right? It gets much darker. Ovesen talks about allegedly witnessing Diddy physically abuse his then-girlfriend, Cassie. She even draws a parallel between that incident and alleged abuse she herself experienced.
That's a deeply disturbing aspect of her account.
Yeah.
And tragically, violence against women, fueled by deeply rooted misogyny, isn't confined to any one industry or era. Ovesen's point is that it often stems from a place of insecurity and a need for control, manifesting as a hatred intertwined with desire.
And she goes further to connect it to the broader issue of how women are often treated as objects or possessions in these circles. Like their worth is directly tied to their appearance or their availability to powerful men.
It's a stark reminder that privilege and wealth don't erase these harmful attitudes. In fact, they can often provide cover for them to thrive. Ovesen is drawing a direct line between the lavish parties, the extravagant lifestyle, and a darker underbelly of exploitation and abuse.
Now, Ovesen is very clear in this article. She believes more women need to tell their stories. She sees power in speaking out, even if it means revisiting incredibly painful experiences. But it makes you wonder, has the music industry truly changed since then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The hashtag #MeToo movement brought certain behaviors to light and sparked conversations about consent, respect, and accountability. But has that translated into real systemic change? The answer is complex.
And speaking of accountability, what about Diddy's response? The article mentions his lawyer was contacted but didn't comment. However, we do hear from others who were part of that world back then. Diddy's former bodyguard, members of Danity Kane, they've made allegations that seem to echo some of what Ovesen describes.
And that's an important point. Ovesen's account isn't isolated. There are others who are part of that scene who've come forward with their own stories. Whether or not these specific allegations are ever formally addressed, The fact that they're being voiced challenges the culture of silence that often protects powerful figures.
It's like we see the shiny surface, the parties, the fame, but then underneath, there's this whole other reality. And it makes you wonder how much has really changed, not just in music, but in any industry where you have these big power imbalances.
Yeah, that's really what Ovesen's story brings to light, right? It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths and these patterns, the abuse, the silence. It's not limited to one industry or era, is it?
Sadly, no. And you can really feel Ovesen grappling with that in this article. Like when she talks about women finding the courage to share their experiences, she uses the word vindication. It's like by speaking out, she's taking back control, reclaiming her own story.
Absolutely. And that's so powerful because for a lot of survivors, speaking out is a huge part of healing, of saying, hey, this happened and I'm not going to be silenced anymore.
It's a powerful message. These conversations, even though they're tough, we have to keep having them.
We do. And it's not enough to just listen. It's about believing survivors, holding people accountable for their actions, and creating a culture where everyone feels safe and respected.
And that's on all of us, right?
Exactly. Because we all have a role to play in this. Think about it. As consumers, as fans, are we, even unknowingly, part of the system that allows these things to happen? It's something to really think about long after this deep dive is over.
Absolutely. It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. But these are conversations we need to keep having. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive for today.